Imagine, you are an 18th century fisherman off the coast of Norway.
Oh, setting the scene right away. I like it.
Right, yeah. So you are in this tiny wooden boat, and it is pitching violently in the freezing pitch black water of the North Atlantic.
Which is already a nightmare scenario, honestly.
Exactly. And you cast your net, your muscles are just burning from the cold, and suddenly the water completely churns with life.
Like an unnatural amount of life.
Yes, you pull up the net and it is just overflowing. You are pulling up hundreds, maybe thousands of massive cod and ling. I mean, it is the catch of an absolute lifetime.
And you're not celebrating.
No, not at all. As you look at this unbelievable bounty, your blood just runs completely cold. You are terrified. Because, well, according to local legend, an unnatural sudden abundance of fish out here in the deep water means only one thing.
You're floating directly over the Kraken.
Yes, you are right on top of it.
It's just the ultimate maritime paradox, you know?
What do you mean?
Well, the very thing that promises to feed your family for the entire winter is also essentially the harbinger of your immediate violent death.
Right. Welcome to a brand new deep dive, by the way. I have been really looking forward to this one.
Oh, me too. It's such a massive topic.
It really is. Because our mission today is to untangle one of the most terrifying, enduring, and honestly, historically confusing sea monsters of all time.
The Kraken.
The Kraken. We are going to trace the entire evolution of it, starting with the terrified whispers of Viking sailors and those ancient Scandinavian sagas.
And then moving into the Enlightenment era, right?
Yeah, exactly. We'll look at the utterly confused attempts of early scientists trying to classify it, all the way up to its terrifying resurrection in upcoming modern blockbuster horror cinema.
The stack of source material we are working with today is just phenomenal. It really forces us to look at how humans process fear across entirely different centuries.
Right, because we're pulling from, 17th century historical glossaries?
Yeah, those and the foundational 1752 text, The Natural History of Norway.
Oh, Pontoppidan's book.
Exactly. Plus encyclopedias of mythical beasts, actual marine biology records of giant squids, and we're even breaking down transcript leaks from upcoming 2026 and 2027 blockbuster film trailers.
I mean, as a journalist and a history researcher, digging through these primary sources has just been a total revelation for me.
I can imagine. It's a lot to sift through.
It is. You see the sheer panic recorded in these ancient texts,
Yeah.
right? And then you see the arrogance of early scientists trying to fit that panic into a neat little box.
Right, trying to sanitize the monster, basically.
Exactly. And, on a personal note, as a parent of 2 kids, I spend a fair amount of time checking for monsters under the bed.
Naturally, it's part of the job description.
It is, but let me tell you, after doing this research, the monsters hiding under the bed have absolutely nothing on the monsters hiding under the ocean.
That is a very fair assessment. I mean, the deep ocean is basically the ultimate dark room.
Ooh, the ultimate dark room. I like that.
Well, it's an environment completely hostile to human survival, which just makes it the perfect blank canvas for our deepest anxieties.
So true. So to you listening right now, if you have ever felt that primal shiver, looking down off the edge of a boat into dark, deep water.
That deeply unsettling feeling.
Yes. This deep dive is going to validate every single one of those fears. But before we can even begin to visualize this monster, we need to understand the name itself.
Right. The etymology.
Yeah, because as a journalist, getting the definitions right is always the crucial first step to uncovering the truth. So where does the word Kraken actually come from?
Well, etymology is essentially like archaeology for language.
Okay, I love that analogy.
It's true. It tells us exactly what the people who coined the term were seeing, or at least what they were thinking when they named it.
So what were they thinking with Kraken?
If we look at the Norwegian etymology, the word krak or kraksjon are the definite forms of the noun krak, and its root meaning is highly specific. It translates roughly to a malformed or overgrown crooked tree.
Wait, a crooked tree?
Yeah, a twisted, crooked tree.
I mean, that doesn't exactly scream giant deep-sea squid monster.
Not to a modern ear, no.
Yeah.
But we have to look at how that word functioned in their daily lives.
Okay, lay it on me.
So the word stems from the Old Norse kraki, which is related to words meaning hook or crook. And this connects directly to ancient maritime tools.
Oh, like anchors and stuff?
Exactly. Ancient Scandinavian sailors and fishermen used primitive grapnel anchors.
Right, because they didn't, like, have forged iron anchors readily available for every tiny little fishing vessel,
Exactly. Iron was expensive. They had to use what the landscape provided.
which was a lot of trees.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they would take a severed spruce treetop or, a thick branchy bush trunk, strip it down, and leave these crooked, sturdy branches sticking out of it.
That sounds incredibly heavy.
It was. And then they would weigh this heavy piece of gnarled wood down with a large stone sinker, tie a rope to it, and use that as an anchor or a drag.
And they called that specific tool a crake.
Yes. Sometimes they also called it a crab, meaning crab,
Hmm.
because of how it sort of scuttled along the seabed, catching on rocks.
Okay, wow. Now, visualize that for a second.
Put yourself in the boat.
Yeah. You are a fisherman. It's twilight. The water is dark. You are hauling your incredibly heavy anchor up from the freezing depths.
Your arms are aching.
Right. And what breaks the surface of the water? A massive, gnarled, twisted tree trunk with thick, crooked branches sticking out in every direction, just dripping with seaweed and dark water.
It looks exactly like a writhing mass of tentacles breaking the surface.
It totally does. That is the detail that completely reframed this myth for me.
Right, because it shifts the origin.
Exactly. The name didn't start as a strict biological description of a living animal. It started as a visual metaphor.
A very grounded, practical metaphor.
Yeah. A crooked tree anchor dragged from the ocean floor is just a terrifyingly perfect stand-in for a giant cephalopod.
It is a brilliant linguistic evolution. And, they had other colloquial names for it too, based on similar visual metaphors.
Like what?
There are synonyms in the historical glossaries like horven, which means the harrow, or seahorven, the sea harrow.
And a harrow is an agricultural tool, right? Like a heavy frame set with teeth used to break up clods of dirt.
Precisely. And an Icelandic philologist named Finnur Johnson actually pointed out back in 1920 that calling it a sea harrow might have been suggested by the way inkfish or squids seem to, aggressively plow through the sea.
Oh, like churning the water behind them?
Exactly. They also refer to it as the anchor troll or anchor troll.
Anchor troll. I love that so much.
It's very evocative, isn't it?
It is. And it shows how deeply this creature was tied to their everyday seafaring equipment. It wasn't some distant god in the sky. It was right there in the water with their tools.
A hazard of the workplace.
Totally. But what is truly wild to me is how this ancient Viking slang for a piece of twisted driftwood actually hijacked modern science.
Oh, it completely infiltrated taxonomy. It shows the sheer power of the myth.
How did that happen?
Well, because the legend became so culturally pervasive, early naturalists simply adopted the local slang. In modern Swedish, the word for octopuses is krakar,
Wow.
and in German it's kraken. Those words became the actual scientific order name for octopoda in those languages.
So wait, the common octopus in Swedish is literally called the Jättekrak, like the giant kraken.
Yes, exactly. And in German, it's the gewöhnlicher Krak, the common kraken.
That is wild.
And it goes further. The entire family of Octopodae is known as echte Kraken, the true krakens in German.
That is fascinating. So this mythological name, born from a piece of twisted wood, became the literal taxonomical bedrock for cephalopods in Northern Europe.
It absolutely did.
So, okay, how does a piece of wood become a flesh and blood nightmare?
That's the big question.
I think that transformation comes from the brutal reality of Viking seafaring in the North Atlantic. If you think about the old Norse sagas, you can't read a Scandinavian text without tripping over giant sea beasts.
They are everywhere in the lore.
Right. You have Jormungandr, the world serpent, who is so massive he encircles the entire earth. You have Ran, the Norse goddess of the sea, who physically drags drowned sailors down with a giant net.
And we have to remember these myths served a vital psychological function.
As a coping mechanism.
Essentially, yes.
Mhm.
The North Atlantic is one of the most hostile environments on Earth. Ships vanish constantly, sailors drown.
Right, it was just an occupational hazard of living there.
Yeah. So when a community loses people to the sea without a single trace, Ran and her net, or a giant serpent, provide a narrative framework.
That makes total sense. It is so much easier to process that your husband or brother was taken by a powerful god than to accept the cold, unfeeling randomness of just a rogue wave.
Exactly. It gives the tragedy meaning.
But those are gobs and serpents. The direct, tangible predecessor to the kraken as a biological animal is something called the hafgufa.
Ah, yes, the Hafgufa.
Right, because I was reading through the medieval texts, specifically the King's Mirror from around 1250 and the Urvar Odds saga.
Incredible sources.
Truly. And they describe this giant sea creature, the Hafgufa, which translates roughly to sea week or sea steamer.
Sea steamer, yeah.
And it was said to be so enormous that when it surfaced, it literally looked like an actual island.
The Hafgufa is the crucial missing link in this whole story. It wasn't just big. It possessed specific, terrifying abilities.
Oh, the abilities are wild.
The medieval texts claimed it created giant whirlpools by sucking in massive amounts of seawater.
Right, which would trap and swallow entire ships.
Yep.
And it used deception. The sagas say it would belch up food to lure massive schools of fish into its gaping mouth, and by extension, any unsuspecting fishermen following the catch.
It was basically an ambush predator on a massive scale.
Exactly. And over time, according to the historical glossaries we looked at, the descriptions of the Hafgufa essentially merged with the newer Kraken legend.
It sort of bled into each other.
Yeah. The Kraken inherited the Hafgufa's most terrifying traits, like the island-sized camouflage and the ability to generate those ship-destroying whirlpools.
It's a classic case of mythological amalgamation.
Now, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second as a researcher.
Please do.
You have terrified, freezing sailors in the 13th century. They are exhausted, malnourished, and, highly superstitious.
Conditions were awful.
Right. So a sperm whale breaches near their longship. It blows a massive spout of water into the air. They panic.
I see where you're going with this.
Why shouldn't we just assume they misidentified a whale and called it a monster?
It's a very logical assumption to make from our modern vantage point. We tend to view medieval people as scientifically illiterate.
Right. We assume they just didn't know any better.
But in the context of maritime survival, that assumption is entirely wrong.
Really? Entirely wrong.
Yes. If we look closely at that 13th century text you just mentioned, the King's Mirror, it completely refutes the idea that they were just confusing whales for monsters.
How so?
Well, the King's Mirror wasn't a book of fairy tales. It was an educational text written for a Norwegian prince. It functioned essentially as a survival and governance manual.
Okay, so it's practical.
Highly practical.
Yeah.
And in its pages, it meticulously cataloged 21 actual real-world whale species.
Wait, 21 species in the year 1250?
Precisely.
Yeah.
And they categorized them with incredible functional detail.
Like what kind of detail?
They documented the blubber cutters, noting they were the most numerous and completely harmless to ships. They knew about porpoises, accurately noting their size limit. They knew the behavior of the Hawaiian whale.
Oh, wow.
Their livelihoods, their food supply, and their very lives depended on knowing exactly what was in the water with them.
That completely flips the script for me.
Right. Because if these sailors were adept enough at marine biology to identify and classify 21 different types of whales, they knew exactly what a whale looked like.
And they explicitly separated all 21 of those whales from the monstrous Hafgufa.
Exactly. They categorized the Hafgufa as something else entirely.
Wow. So when experts who know whales perfectly well tell you that thing that just surfaced was not a whale, we probably ought to listen to them.
Exactly. They were observing a genuine biological anomaly. They simply lacked the scientific vocabulary to classify it, so they reached for the mythological vocabulary instead.
That makes so much sense. So if the Viking sailors knew the difference between a whale and a monster, how did that local oral tradition end up accepted as global scientific fact?
That is where the Enlightenment steps in and makes a huge mess of things.
Right. That transformation happens when highly educated men start trying to map the world. Let's look at the Swedish cartographer, Olaus Magnus.
Olaus Magnus is a pivotal figure here.
He is. In 1539, he publishes the Carta Marina.
Which is one of the earliest and most detailed maps of the Nordic countries.
And it is just a stunning piece of art. But right there in the Norwegian Sea, amidst the shipping routes, he draws these incredible sea monsters.
He didn't hold back on the illustrations.
He really didn't. He illustrates a swine whale with ferocious teeth, and next to it, a massive bearded whale with flaming red eyes.
Flaming red eyes.
Yes, and the text he provides gives actual measurements. He writes that the circumference of its eye measures 16 or 20 feet.
Which is just...
Depending on the exact foot measurement used in 16th century Scandinavia, we are talking about an eye that is 1.5 to 1.9 meters in diameter.
An eye nearly 2 meters across. Just let the scale of that sink in.
It's massive.
That is an eye the size of a large dining room table staring up at a wooden ship.
That is terrifying. And later, in 1555, he writes a massive book expanding on this map.
Right, the Historia de Gentibus septentrionalibus.
Yes, and he describes this monster as having a square head, being black in color, and having long root-like horns around its head, akin to an uprooted tree.
Ah, there is that crooked tree metaphor again, codified into text.
Exactly.
What's vital to understand about the Carta Marina is the function of cartography at the time.
How do you mean?
Maps weren't just geographical tools back then, they were encyclopedias. The monsters drawn on them weren't just decorative flourishes. They were warnings of real reported hazards.
So by putting it on the map.
By putting the monster on a map, Olaus Magnus elevated it from a fisherman's ghost story to a geographic reality.
And this geographical reality gets solidified even further in the 18th century.
Oh, definitely.
In 1729, a Dano-Norwegian missionary named Hans Egede writes about the Kraken, and he explicitly equates it to the old Hafgufa.
He bridges the gap.
Yeah. He says his Norwegian informants described it as a beast that covers the whole sea when it surfaces, with many heads and claws used to drag ships into the abyss.
But the man who truly made the Kraken a global scientific sensation was Bishop Eric Pontoppidan.
Yes, Pontoppidan. He is the central figure in the Kraken's scientific history.
Absolutely.
In 1752, he publishes The Natural History of Norway. Now, as a bishop and a respected intellectual, his words carried immense weight across Europe.
He was a serious man of science for his time.
And he did not hold back. He definitively claimed the Kraken is, quote, incontestably the largest sea monster ever heard of.
And he gave it a size, too.
He did. He claimed it could reach up to 1.5 miles in length.
1.5 miles.
Right. He wrote that if its arms were to lay hold of the largest man-of-war ship, they would easily pull it down to the bottom.
But here is where we get back to that terrifying duality we talked about at the beginning.
Oh, the fishing aspect.
Yes. The Kraken wasn't just a threat, it was a vital economic blessing.
This is what makes the Kraken so unique among historical monsters, I think. Most monsters, like dragons or demons, are purely antagonistic.
Right, you avoid them at all costs. You don't seek out a dragon.
Exactly. But the Kraken was intrinsically tied to the survival of the coastal communities.
According to Pontoppidan and the deep-seated lore of the Norwegian fishermen, they actively took the risk to row out and fish over the Kraken.
Because the Kraken supposedly attracted massive, abundant shoals of cod and ling.
Right. So if a fisherman returned to port with a boat practically sinking under the weight of an unbelievably huge catch, there was actually a common proverb.
Yes. You must have fished on Kraken.
It's a terrifying risk-reward calculation.
As a parent, the only analogy I can think of is it's like trying to get your kids to clean their room by hiding a new toy in the middle of a massive, dangerous mess.
That's a great way to put it.
You know the exact thing that is giving you a livelihood could instantly, violently kill you, but the economic desperation is so high you take the boat out anyway.
You're foraging for highly valuable truffles in the middle of an active minefield.
Exactly. Now, Pontoppidan, trying to be a rigorous man of science, had a very specific biological theory about why the Kraken attracted so many fish.
Oh boy. The excrement theory.
Yes, it is incredibly gross, but also surprisingly revealing.
Pontoppidan hypothesized that the Kraken operated on this bizarre digestive cycle. He wrote that the monster fed continuously for several months, and then spent the following few months completely stationary, doing nothing but emptying its excrement.
Disgusting.
Very. And he believed this discharge thickened and clouded the water, emitting a strong scent that attracted the huge schools of fish.
But, and this is the brilliant part, a later naturalist named Henry Lee read Pontoppidan's gross account of the clouded water and had a massive realization.
He connected the dots.
He did. He pointed out that the supposed excrement was actually an observation of a very real defense mechanism.
It was ink.
Yes, it was the discharge of ink by a giant cephalopod.
If we look closely at how science works, this is a beautiful example of accurate observation paired with flawed interpretation.
Because the fishermen genuinely saw the water cloud over.
Yes. They saw the water suddenly cloud over with a dark, thick substance. That is a documented fact.
Right.
Pontoppidan interpreted it through his limited understanding of monster biology as excrement. Henry Lee later corrected it to ink.
So the myth slowly distills into biological reality.
Exactly.
It's brilliant. But despite these tiny glimpses of accurate biology, when naturalists actually tried to classify this 1.5-mile-long island monster, the scientific community descended into absolute chaos.
Chaos is almost an understatement. The taxonomy of the Kraken highlights the intense growing pains of early modern science.
Let's just look at the sheer list of abilities they were trying to classify based on centuries of rumors.
That's quite a list.
We have beak-like mouths, snapping ships in half, the ability to submerge quickly to create ship-sinking whirlpools.
The island camouflage deception.
Right, where its back looks like dry land, luring sailors to step onto it before it sinks, and of course the massive ink cloud releases.
It's a formidable, totally contradictory list of traits. It simply doesn't fit neatly into any single known animal phylum at the time.
Exactly. And to understand why this was such a disaster, we have to understand how early taxonomy worked.
Right.
Even Carl Linnaeus, the father of modern taxonomy, the scientist who essentially invented the naming system we still use today, got totally tripped up by the Kraken.
Linnaeus was operating in an era where physical specimens of exotic animals were incredibly rare.
He couldn't exactly order a giant squid online.
No, he had to rely heavily on written accounts, letters from explorers, and illustrations. When you can't dissect the animal yourself, you have to trust the written record.
And because he trusted the written record, in the early editions of his famous Systema Naturae, Linnaeus included a fabulous genus called Microcosmos.
Microcosmos, meaning a little world.
Right. He described it as a body covered with various heterogeneous bits. It was essentially a scientific catch-all classification for a colony organism.
Or a beast so unimaginably large that it had other ecosystems growing all over its back.
Yeah, and subsequent authors pointed to Linnaeus's writing, and they grouped other mythical beasts like the half-gufa as krakens, falling under this bizarre microcosmos umbrella.
Linnaeus was desperate to categorize the world. He believed God created order, and it was his job to document it.
But the kraken didn't fit? No, it threatened that order. So he created a vague, impossible category just to have somewhere to put it. Pontoppidan was equally confused about the kraken's family tree. He openly debated whether it was a giant crab, an octopus, or a starfish.
A starfish?
Yeah, he actually leaned heavily toward it being a giant starfish. He noted that specific starfish, known as Medusa's heads, were washing ashore across the Norwegian coast.
And he drew a wild conclusion from that.
He did. Local lore convinced him these tiny starfish were the kraken's young.
Which is just a tragicomic misunderstanding of scale.
Totally.
But it makes sense linguistically and visually. The starfish he's referring to are gorgonocephalids.
Gorgon, like Medusa from Greek mythology with the snake hair.
Exactly. A basket star washing up on the beach is intricate, strange, and covered in writhing, branching arms.
Oh, I see.
To a coastal community, it looks like a miniature version of the gnarled tree branches they associate with the kraken.
So naturally, they assume the small, many-armed thing must grow into the giant, many-armed thing.
It's flawed logic, but you can see how they got there.
Absolutely. But if Linnaeus and Pontoppidan were just genuinely confused, the absolute peak of taxonomic arrogance belongs to the French malacologist Pierre Denis de Montfort.
Oh, Montfort. He is quite the character.
We are talking about the year 1801. Montfort publishes an encyclopedic description of mollusks, and he decides to make some incredibly bold, entirely fabricated claims.
Montfort is a fascinating, frustrating figure.
Why frustrating?
He was determined to be the man who definitively solved the Kraken mystery, but he let his ego and his ambition completely outstrip his evidence.
To solve the contradictory descriptions, Montfort decided there wasn't just one giant monster, there were two.
He doubled down.
He really did. He separated the colossal octopus, which was merely massive and violently attacked ships, from the kraken octopod, which he deemed to be the largest animal on Earth, dwarfing everything else.
He essentially created a hierarchy of sea monsters to make the math work in his head.
Right. And to prove his colossal octopus existed, he relied on an unverified account from sailors off the coast of Angola who claimed they were attacked by a giant squid.
A classic friend of a friend story.
Exactly. They supposedly made a painting of the event as a votive offering at a chapel in St. Malo, France.
And Montfort used the rumor of that painting as definitive proof.
Yes. He then drew his own iconic, dramatic illustration of a colossal octopus wrapping its tentacles around the masts of a ship.
And that specific illustration became the defining visual of the Kraken for over a century. It codified the monster as an octopus in the public imagination.
But Montfort didn't stop at drawing pictures. He went totally off the rails into conspiracy theory territory regarding a real historical event.
The Ville de Paris incident.
Yes. In 1782, a fleet of 10 British and captured French warships tragically sank.
Which was a massive loss of life.
Huge. And naval history and survivor accounts tell us they ran into a massive catastrophic hurricane.
A terrible tragedy, but a known meteorological hazard of the era.
Not according to Montfort.
No, he had different theory.
He publicly claimed that a storm couldn't possibly sink 10 ships at once. He stated, by his own arrogant process of elimination, that such an event could only be accounted for by a coordinated, simultaneous attack from a fleet of giant octopuses.
It is astounding audacity.
It really is.
He took a documented historical tragedy involving the loss of hundreds of lives in a massive storm and shamelessly rewrote it to fit his monster thesis.
Think about how fast a fake news article or a conspiracy theory spreads on your social media feed today.
Oh, instantly.
Someone posts a wild claim, it gets shared thousands of times before anyone fact-checks it, and suddenly it becomes reality for a lot of people.
And Montfort was basically hacking that exact same human psychological weakness in 1801.
He literally told a friend of his regarding the Ville de Paris claim, quote, "If my entangled ship is accepted, I will make my colossal polpe overthrow a whole fleet."
He knew he was lying.
Outrage, fear, and awe would sell his encyclopedias.
It is a profound cautionary tale. It highlights a deep human need to categorize the unknown, yes. But it also shows how science in the 19th century was often driven by intense ego and a desire for fame.
He wanted the clicks, basically.
Exactly. Montfort wanted the glory of discovery, even if he had to fabricate the data. It shows how easily misinformation can spread when it is wrapped in the authoritative guise of a scientific textbook.
But here is the incredible twist. Fake news and arrogant scientists aside, the ancient fishermen weren't making it up.
No, they weren't.
The myths had to come from somewhere real, and eventually the ocean started spitting up the very fleshy, undeniable truth.
The shift from folklore to documented physical biology is where this story gets thrilling.
It really does. It started with biological encounters that people just couldn't ignore or explain away.
Right, actual physical evidence.
Back in 1680, an enormous tentacled creature washed ashore and died in the shallows near Alstahag Church in Norway.
And Pontoppidan actually wrote about it.
He did, though he misunderstood it, thinking it was a young, careless kraken that had crawled onto the rocks like a snail and gotten stuck.
Which is funny, but modern malacologists look at the surviving descriptions of that Alstahag account and are fairly certain it was a giant squid beaching itself.
And then the encounter started happening out in the open ocean, documented by multiple credible witnesses.
Like the Electon.
Yes, in 1861, the French ship Electon encountered a massive piece of a squid floating at sea. They tried to haul it aboard, but the flesh tore.
But the absolute smoking gun, the moment the monster became a biological fact, happened in 1873 in Newfoundland.
The Reverend Moses Harvey incident.
This is a foundational moment in marine biology.
It really is. So 2 fishermen, Theophilus Picot and his assistant, are out in their small boat fishing in Conception Bay.
Just a regular day.
Yep. They see a massive, tangled mass floating in the water. They row over to investigate, thinking it's debris. They poke it with a boat hook.
A big mistake.
Huge mistake. The mass instantly comes alive and attacks. It lunges at the boat, wrapping its tentacles around the hull.
They described it as having a sharp, parrot-like beak the size of a 6-gallon keg.
Just put yourself in that boat.
I'd rather not.
Imagine looking over the side of a small wooden dory and seeing a razor-sharp beak the size of a keg snapping at your face, surrounded by writhing, suction-cupped arms.
It is the definition of panic.
They only managed to escape by grabbing a hatchet they kept on board and violently hacking off 2 of its tentacles as it tried to pull them under.
Pure survival mode.
The squid retreated into a massive cloud of dark ink. They brought the severed tentacles back to port and gave them to a local amateur naturalist, the Reverend Moses Harvey.
He did something incredibly important with them.
He draped them over a sponge bath, photographed them, and documented them for science.
That photograph proved, definitively and finally, that squids of a giant variety exist.
And they were spewing ink, exactly like the Norwegian sailors had claimed for centuries.
It vindicated the fishermen. And finding these physical specimens allows us to go back and solve some of the most puzzling historical descriptions.
Like what?
Which brings us back to Olaus Magnus and his 1539 map, featuring the monster with flaming red eyes.
Yes. For the longest time, the idea of a sea monster with glowing red eyes sounded like pure demonic fantasy cooked up by a cartographer.
It sounds like pure magic.
But modern biological concepts explain these early sightings perfectly. It all comes down to bioluminescence.
Right. If we look at deep-sea cephalopods today, bioluminescence, the ability of an organism to create and emit light, is incredibly common.
What do they use it for?
It's used for communication, camouflage, and hunting in the pitch black of the deep ocean.
There is a specific species of deep-sea squid called Teningia danae.
A fascinating creature.
It has the largest photophores, which are specialized light-producing organs in the natural world.
And where are they located?
These massive photophores are located on the ends of two of its arms, and they emit blinding flashes of light to disorient prey. Furthermore, the colossal squid, which lives in the deep Antarctic waters, actually has light organs built directly inside its eyes.
So we have all the biological ingredients to explain the myth.
We do.
We know sperm whales prey on giant squid. We know giant squids can be incredibly large and possess massive bioluminescent organs.
So picture this scenario.
Okay.
A sperm whale dives deep into the twilight zone of the ocean. It engages in a massive, violent battle with a giant squid.
A clash of titans.
The whale wins, and it drags the dying, thrashing squid toward the surface to breathe, right as dusk is falling over the North Atlantic.
A Viking longship is rowing past.
The water suddenly churns violently. A massive gray shape, the back of the whale, breaks the surface. Tangled tightly around it are enormous, writhing tentacles.
And in the dim easing light, the squid is firing off its defensive photophores.
The terrified sailors look into the churning water and see massive, glowing, flashing red eyes staring back at them.
It perfectly explains the ancient sightings.
It really does. But I have to ask you, does this mean the ancient sailors were essentially just doing terrible marine biology?
Terrible marine biology.
Yeah, like they saw a 40-foot squid fighting a sperm whale, saw glowing red eyes, and understandably said, nope, that's not a squid, that's a sea demon.
That is precisely what happened. But it wasn't terrible biology. It was the best biology they could do with the tools and paradigms available to them.
Because they just didn't have the words for it.
Right. They lacked the scientific and taxonomic vocabulary to describe a bioluminescent deep-sea struggle, so they used the mythological vocabulary of gods and demons to communicate the immense danger of what they witnessed.
And the science gets even crazier. Because we are learning that the unbelievable scale they imagined, the idea of a kraken large enough to crush a ship, might not have been that far off, historically speaking.
Oh, the paleontology research.
Let's look at some cutting-edge paleontology research from 2026.
The fossil record is continually revealing incredible things about the ancient oceans, particularly concerning cephalopods.
An international team of researchers recently studied 27 fossilized octopod jaws recovered from outer shelf deposits in Japan and Vancouver Island.
Just the jaws.
Yeah, because the soft tissue doesn't survive. But they discovered that in the late Cretaceous seas, the era of the dinosaurs, there were giant fin octopods belonging to a genus called Nanemotethus.
And the size estimates based on these fossilized jaws are staggering.
They really are. They estimate that one species, Nanemotethus jaletsky, was 3 to 8 meters long.
Which is huge.
But another species, Nanemotethus hegardi, is estimated to have been between 7 and 19 meters long.
19 meters.
That is over 60 feet of intelligent, tentacled predator. The researchers concluded these animals were highly intelligent apex predators that lived in the water column and literally fed on vertebrates, crushing their bones with powerful, massive jaws.
What's truly fascinating here from a biological perspective is the concept of convergent evolution.
Can you break that down for us?
Sure. Convergent evolution is when unrelated organisms independently evolve similar traits to adapt to similar environments.
Okay.
Top predators, whether they are cephalopods like these giant Cretaceous octopuses or vertebrates like mosasaurs or modern killer whales, independently evolve powerful jaws, immense size, and high intelligence to rule the oceans.
So the Kraken isn't a fake concept.
Not at all.
We just had the timeline slightly wrong. Hyper-intelligent, giant-jawed cephalopods capable of crushing large prey did rule the seas millions of years ago.
Exactly. The genetic potential for a creature that matches the scale of the Kraken myth exists entirely within the bounds of earthly biology.
It's incredible. We found the real giant squids hiding in the deep, and we found their massive, bone-crushing prehistoric ancestors in the fossil record.
We solved the mystery, essentially.
But finding the scientific truth didn't put the myth to bed. We didn't stop being scared.
No, human nature doesn't work like that.
Instead, discovering the truth just gave modern storytellers a better, more realistic visual vocabulary for our nightmares.
Which brings us to the modern mythos. How did the Kraken evolve from a misunderstood biological phenomenon into an absolute icon of modern pop culture and horror cinema?
There was a crucial literary bridge in the 19th century that made this transition happen. Writers took the scientific reports of giant squids and injected them with malicious intent.
It was a very deliberate narrative shift.
You have Victor Hugo's Toilers of the Sea, featuring a terrifying battle with a giant octopus. You have Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, where giant squids attack the submarine Nautilus.
You have Alfred Tennyson's famous poem, The Kraken.
Right. And these authors did something profound. They took the creature out of the realm of a mere natural hazard, like a hidden reef or a setting storm, and transformed it into a literal, literary antagonist.
They gave the monster agency.
Yes, it wasn't just existing in the ocean, it was actively attacking humanity.
And that literary shift paved the way for modern pop culture. The Kraken is everywhere now.
It really is. H.P. Lovecraft drew heavily on the imagery of giant, ancient cephalopods for his Cthulhu mythos.
The visual of the tentacles is instantly recognizable.
It is the iconic meme-generating "Release the Kraken" line from the movie Clash of the Titans. It's even the name of the NHL hockey team, the Seattle Kraken.
But if we look at the upcoming films, directors are taking the Kraken in a very specific, much darker direction that reflects our current society.
Let's analyze the trailer for the upcoming 2026 Norwegian film, simply titled Kraken.
Right, the horror film.
I dug into the translated transcript of this trailer, and it is a pure, intense monster horror film, but with a very modern twist.
What is the setup in the trailer?
It is set in modern-day Norway, around a deep fjord. The central locations are a marine research facility and a massive industrial aquaculture farm.
An aquaculture farm. Interesting setting.
We see characters finding a ravaged shipwreck, and there is a series of mysterious, violent deaths in the water. The dialogue in the trailer is incredibly chilling.
What do they say?
Translating from the Norwegian, a desperate character says, "You need to shut down that aquaculture facility before it's too late. The fjord isn't like it was. We found a shipwreck today. There is something out in the fjord. It's not going to give up."
It's not going to give up. That specific phrasing implies a relentless, targeted malice.
It does.
It's not a random animal attack. It's a mission.
Exactly. And then we have the 2027 blockbuster film, Pirates of the Caribbean, The Kraken's Final Curse.
Yes. The teaser trailer.
We got our hands on the teaser trailer for this, and it features the return of the villain Davy Jones, talking about the Kraken's resurrection. But he makes a very specific point to say the monster is different this time around.
How does he describe the change?
He says the Kraken is not returning with mindless rage, but with, quote, "a captain's cunning and an ancient god's hunger." He says the beast intends to rewrite the very song of the sea.
That is a massive thematic elevation. It pushes the monster from a biological terror back into the realm of vengeful deity.
Let's compare and contrast this evolution. Think about the ancient Norwegian sailors.
Right, the fishermen.
They viewed the Kraken primarily as an act of nature. It was a terrifying hazard of their job, yes, but it was also a natural part of their ecosystem that could bring a massive blessing of abundant fish.
They accepted it as part of the ocean's unpredictable rhythm.
But modern film directors frame it entirely differently.
Right. Modern directors visualize the Kraken as an intelligent, cunning, malevolent antagonist with a specific grudge.
The grudge against us.
The 2026 Norwegian film turns the monster into an ecological punisher, specifically attacking humanity's industrial aquaculture facility.
Essentially, nature fighting back against our overharvesting of the fjords.
While the 2027 Pirates film elevates it to a godlike villain trying to actively rewrite the rules of the ocean to destroy human shipping.
This shift is a brilliant reflection of how humanity's relationship with the ocean has fundamentally changed.
It really is. In Viking times, the ocean was an unfeeling, insurmountable force of nature. You respected it, you survived it, or you didn't. You had no control over it.
Right.
Today, we view the ocean through the lens of control, ecological guilt, and existential threat. We are industrializing its resources with aquaculture. warming its waters, polluting it. We know we are damaging it.
So psychologically, our monsters have adapted to punish us for that exact behavior.
Exactly. The monster always holds up a mirror to the society that creates it. Because we feel guilty about our relationship with the ocean, our modern oceanic monsters have become intelligent, vengeful beings coming back to punish us for our environmental hubris.
It is deeply fascinating. We went from a Viking fisherman saying, this giant animal might accidentally sink my boat while I'm trying to feed my family, to a modern screenwriter saying, this hyper-intelligent ancient beast has a specific, calculated vendetta against humanity's industrial aquaculture.
We constantly project our own modern anxieties and our own guilt onto this ancient, ink-spewing myth.
It proves that as long as we fear the ocean, the Kraken will always find a way to evolve and stay relevant in our stories.
That's the power of a good monster.
Okay, let's wrap up this incredible journey.
It's been quite a ride.
The Kraken is the ultimate example of how a real biological phenomenon, massive bioluminescent squids fighting sperm whales in the freezing twilight zone of the ocean, gets filtered through human fear.
It gets recorded by overzealous, ambitious naturalists who want to be famous.
Right. And ultimately, it is transformed into a cinematic icon of oceanic vengeance.
It is a perfect distillation of how biology, mythology, and storytelling intersect and feed off each other over centuries.
So to the listener, the next time you are walking on the beach at dusk and you look at a piece of twisted, gnarled driftwood washed up on the sand,
Or you see a dark, unidentifiable shadow moving in the deep water off a pier.
I want you to remember that your primal fear is totally justified by centuries of maritime history. The sailors weren't crazy.
No, they were simply looking at a world that was bigger, wilder, and far more dangerous than they had the scientific words to describe.
Exactly. And I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over.
Ooh, what is it?
We live in an age of incredible technological advancement. But the terrifying truth is that we have mapped more of the surface of Mars than we have of our own deep oceans here on Earth.
That is always a stunning statistic to remember.
Think about the sheer volume of the unknown right beneath us.
The dark room is still mostly unexplored.
And the legend reaches far beyond our own planet. If you look at Saturn's largest moon, Titan, astronomers have discovered a massive deep sea of liquid methane near its north pole.
Wow.
And do you know what they officially named it?
Kraken Mare,
The myth has literally expanded into the cosmos.
a fitting tribute to the ultimate unknown deep.
It really is.
But look back down here on Earth. If the scientific reality of convergent evolution created 60-foot-long, bone-crushing, hyper-intelligent octopuses in the Cretaceous period,
And we are still finding new, bizarre, bioluminescent life in the abyssal depths today. What else is waiting down there in the dark, just biding its time for its mythological debut?